My name is Jen. I am 57 years old. My husband passed away a year ago, and I now live in the house he left behind. Our family consists of my son, his wife, their 2 children, and myself, making us a family of 5. It's a bit of a complicated story, but my son, Dan, is divorced, and his current wife, Kate, is his second spouse. Ben, my elder grandchild, is from Dan's previous marriage and has no blood relation to Kate or Tina, the younger grandchild. Dan came back to this house with Ben 3 years ago after his first wife cheated on him. At that time, Ben was only 2 years old and emotionally unstable, longing for his mother in this unfamiliar home. Watching little Ben like that, I took great care of him. The following year, Dan brought her home. "Mom, I've decided to remarry her," he announced, catching me by surprise. I had thought he was just busy with work, but this was what he was up to. While his own son was struggling emotionally, he was out having fun, ignoring his responsibilities. Despite being my son, I was so appalled I couldn't say anything. "And she's pregnant with our child," he added, shocking me even more. "Sorry for the sudden news, but we hope for your support. We thought of looking for a new place, but this house is spacious with extra rooms, so we figured we'd just stay here." That's fine, right? What audacity. But knowing there was a baby on the way, how could I possibly turn them out? Thus began our life together with my son, his wife, and my grandchildren. I don't know what Dan's first wife was like since they lived apart, but Kate didn't do much around the house. She seemed nice enough, getting along well with Ben, but she left all the housework to me, using her pregnancy as an excuse. Honestly, since I worked part-time, I tried asking for even a little help with the chores. I've been feeling really nauseous. It's tough with my stomach this way, she'd say, always finding some excuse. I couldn't press her when she said things like that, though she seemed perfectly healthy to me. The hardship of pregnancy varies from person to person, so it's hard to say. But it felt like everything was being dumped on me. I had no one to talk to about it. My husband, who always listened, was no longer here. "When she says she's suffering, you should be more considerate. No one likes a strict mother-in-law these days. Besides, isn't dinner ready yet?" I once tried talking to Dan about it, but he didn't take it seriously. "So sorry for troubling you with such things," I thought, holding back my heavy feelings each day. During these times, Tina was born. I couldn't be around much when Ben was born since we lived far away. What a joy it is to have a baby close by. It's not that I don't love Ben, but witnessing the birth of new life, I saw the sparkle in his eyes. The pride of becoming a big brother. He was determined to protect his little sister. I could feel that resolve in him. Without comparing these 2 young children, I vowed in my heart to love them both equally and deeply. As Kate started taking care of Tina, she became increasingly harsh with Ben. Perhaps because Tina was her own flesh and blood, her affection seemed to overshadow her feelings for Ben. Postpartum mood swings are common, I guess, so maybe it's understandable to some extent. I decided it was my role to compensate for Ben's emotional needs. But Kate's attitude only worsened. Yet, Ben, who had always been treated kindly by Kate, seemed to want to believe in her. He eagerly helped around the house, trying to catch Kate's attention. One day, after finishing my morning shift, I returned home to the sound of Kate's yelling, loud enough to be heard outside. "Why can't you do anything right? You've just made more work for me." She was scolding Ben, who had accidentally knocked over a can of powdered milk while trying to make a bottle for Tina. There, he's just a child. There's no need to be so upset. It's good enough that he wants to help, right?" I tried to calm Kate, but she was having none of it. "Just stay out of it. If you want to interfere, you can clean up this mess," she snapped back, unwilling to listen. I can only imagine the heartache a child feels being yelled at by their mother, even if she's not his by blood. Sorrow, frustration, regret. Tears welling in his eyes, Ben was trying so hard to hold back his emotions. "I'll clean this up, dear. You've done a lot today," I comforted him, hugging and calming him before starting to clean the white powder from the floor. "Tina, see how clumsy your brother is? He's just useless," Kate remarked disdainfully, speaking to Tina, who couldn't even understand words yet, while ignoring Ben completely. It took all my strength to contain my anger towards her. At dinner that evening, I noticed Ben's absence and asked Kate about it. "Where's Ben?" "I don't know. Maybe he ran away after I scolded him?" That couldn't be true. Ben was only 4 years old. Where would he run away to? Just then, Dan came home. "Dan, I can't find Ben." A boy like him might have gone to the nearby park. "But more importantly, I'm home, Tina." He showed no concern. Even if he's a boy, it's past 7 p.m. Isn't he worried at all? With a heavy heart, I left the house, leaving the two to their dinner. I searched the nearby park, the route to the kindergarten, the supermarket we usually shopped at, all the places I could think of. No sign of Ben. He might have returned home, I thought, heading back. As I approached our gate, I heard a metallic banging from the backyard. Our yard wasn't big, but it had a small shed. The sound seemed to be coming from there. It couldn't be, that's just not possible. Tentatively, I approached, hearing the banging and a faint voice. "Ben! Is that you, Ben?" I flung open the door and there he was, his face swollen from crying, sitting and sobbing. What a terrible thing to do. I hurried back with Ben in my arms to confront the two who were probably having dinner. Seeing my furious expression, they exchanged awkward glances. "What in the world is going on?" I demanded, still holding the sobbing Ben. Dan stuttered in response, well. Kate just told me about it." I shot him a sharp look before Kate, unabashed, retorted, "It's Ben's fault. He ruined Tina's milk." What are they thinking? Locking a child in a storage shed over a small mistake? How could they ignore this and just sit down to eat? I couldn't help but raise my voice. "What are you talking about? It was you who let such a small child handle the milk. And even so, you went too far. Don't you have any sense of responsibility as a mother?" Dan intervened, trying to calm me down. "Mom, let's take it easy. Kate is tired and irritable from taking care of Tina. Go easy on her. If you knew about it and did nothing, you're just as guilty. Locking a 4-year-old in such a cramped, dark space." I was at a loss for words. Dan then admitted, I thought it was too much and tried to stop her. He seemed to be shifting all the blame onto Kate, who glared at him. "You should have let Ben out before stopping her. Are you even his father?" With the two of them silent, I laid down the law. "If something like this happens again, I will ask you both to leave this house." "Wah!" Dan was flustered, and Kate couldn't even look me in the eye. Convinced they wouldn't dare repeat such an act, I took Ben to bathe, fed him a reheated dinner, and tucked him into a warm bed, all without sparing another glance at the two. All the while, Ben defended them. "It's my fault for upsetting Mom. She's not bad. Dad just got home from work, he must have been hungry and tired." His innocence broke my heart. I resolved to keep a close eye on their actions. Though they never apologized, I was more concerned about Ben's well-being. Despite what happened, he continued to help and smile as usual. I couldn't tell if my constant vigilance or their genuine remorse was the reason, but they seemed to stop mistreating Ben. Kate still demanded too much of him and was harsh at times, but Ben himself said, "Grandma, I'm okay. I want to help Mom. Besides, Tina is cute, and I'm the big brother, so I have to be strong." I refrained from intervening too much, fearing it might worsen Kate's mood and lead to further mistreatment of Ben. I wanted to avoid that at all costs. But despite my worries, their attitude towards Ben eventually returned to how it was before Tina's birth, and peace seemed to prevail. Eventually, I relaxed and life went back to normal. 2 months after the dreadful incident, peaceful days continued. One day, my part-time jobs manager asked me to change my shift. Normally, I worked only in the mornings, but they needed someone for the evening until closing. I had reduced my work hours since Ben's incident, but unable to refuse a request, I agreed to the change. "Aren't you going to work today?" Kate asked, surprised to see me at home during my usual work hours. "There's a shift change today. I'm working this evening, so I need you to take care of dinner tonight," I informed her. Kate initially looked annoyed but then brightened up. "Then, let's have an early birthday party for Tina today." Realizing they planned the party knowing I wouldn't be home felt like a deliberate exclusion. I wanted to celebrate my dear grandchild's first birthday too. "Then I better start preparing for the party. I'll tell Dan to come home early." Kate seemed oblivious to my feelings and was happily making plans. "Well then, I'm going out to shop, so please watch Tina. Since you can't join the party, that's the least you can do." She left Tina with me under the pretext of shopping, seizing the opportunity to be alone with her. How selfish can she be? I was tired of arguing and quickly agreed to take care of Tina while Kate went out. Later that night, after an unfamiliar evening shift, I walked home, exhausted from being roped into helping with a party I wasn't even invited to. But the thought of celebrating Tina and seeing Ben's happy face kept me going. Passing by the house, I noticed the lights still on. It was past 9 p.m. time to put Ben to bed. I just hoped they wouldn't leave the cleanup to me. As I looked towards the house, I saw something unbelievable. Ben sitting alone in the garden, staring into the lit room. What was happening? Why was Ben outside? I hurried around to the front gate and into the yard. "Ben! What happened?" He looked up at me, relief in his eyes, but then burst into tears. "What happened? Why are you out here alone?" I pressed for answers, even though I knew I shouldn't. Trembling and crying, Ben couldn't respond. "Let's go inside," I suggested. He looked at me, surprised, then hesitantly spoke. "Today is Tina's birthday. But they said it's a family-only celebration, so I can't go in." He sobbed. I was aghast. Without a word, I took his arm and walked him out of the gate. Something that shouldn't have happened had happened again. "What's wrong, Grandma? Are you angry? Where are we going?" Ben's anxious voice pulled me back to reality. "You haven't eaten since noon, right? And I'm tired from work and hungry. Let's go eat something tasty." I tried to sound cheerful, to reassure him. Ben seemed to understand and responded brightly. "Taking a child to a family restaurant at night." I worried about being judged, but no one seemed to pay us any mind, not even the staff. Leaving Ben at the table, I excused myself. "I'll go get some juice." Pretending to head to the drink station, I took out my phone. It had been a long time since I last made this call, but would it go through? After a few rings, a puzzled voice answered. I introduced myself and apologized for calling so late at night. I briefly explained Ben's situation on the phone, and the person on the other end said they would come right away before hanging up. Returning to the table, Ben was eating his ordered French fries. "You took a while, didn't you?" he asked, looking at me anxiously as I sipped the drink I had placed on the table. "I was just deciding what you might like to drink," I said, making an excuse. Ben immediately brightened up. "I love it," he said cheerfully, drinking it noisily. He's only 5. Here he was in a diner late at night, not even playing around, just sitting quietly, concerned about appearing grown-up. Why does such a good kid have to go through this? I could only watch him eat his French fries, feeling helpless and frustrated. After finishing the French fries, Ben seemed restless. "Shall we order a hamburger too?" I suggested. Shouldn't we go home soon? Won't they get angry?" Ben replied with a worried expression. I couldn't go back yet, but how could I explain this to him? While I was pondering this, a woman entered the diner. I waved at her from our table, and she quickly made her way over. Ben looked up at her with a puzzled expression. The woman, unable to hold back her tears, hugged Ben tightly. The person I had called was Ben's biological mother, Kathy. "Mom?" Ben seemed to remember her. Dan and Kathy had divorced when Ben was 2, 3 years ago. But Ben still remembered his mother, whom he had longed for when he first came to our house. Kathy, too, had never forgotten about Ben for a moment. I waited until the two had calmed down before explaining everything to Kathy. How Kate was harsh with Ben, how he was locked in the shed over spilled milk, and how he was excluded from Tina's birthday party today as not family. I'm sorry, I should have kept a closer watch. I apologized. No, Jen, you don't need to apologize. You've been protecting Ben, and you called me. Kathy responded. I had hesitated to call her, remembering Dan telling me she had an affair, but she was different from what I expected. Kathy, you are Ben's biological mother. I called you on a whim, but I hope it wasn't a bother. Do you have a new partner or family? I asked, hesitant. Kathy raised her voice.
I don't have anyone else. All I wanted was Ben.
What did she mean? I relayed to her what Dan had told me about their divorce. Kathy's face turned pale as she began to reveal the truth. Actually, Dan and that woman, Kate, were having an affair. Looking sadly at the sleeping Ben, Kathy shared the real story. Dan and Kate started their relationship around the time Ben was born. Then a man claiming to be a lawyer suddenly appeared before Kathy, bringing documents alleging her infidelity and neglect of Ben, demanding a divorce, alimony, and child support payments. Kathy, who had no memory of such actions, had no one to turn to. Kathy, who had lost her parents at a young age and was thus all alone in the world, had become estranged from her friends after marrying Dan. As a full-time housewife devoted to her infant son Ben, her interactions outside were limited to casual greetings with neighbors. In such a sparse social environment, it was difficult for her to gather evidence to prove her innocence. I felt dizzy as the reality sunk in. You could have relied on me, I said. But back then, I was so shocked and hurt by Dan's betrayal. I even doubted you, Kathy confessed, filled with remorse. The shame of what my son had done, and my failure to communicate more closely with Kathy at the time, filled me with self-loathing. I'm truly sorry. And now, are you still paying child support? I asked. Yes, I had a little money left by my parents. Also, I was lucky to find work again at the place I was employed before my marriage. I've managed to keep up with the payments for Ben's sake, she replied. I couldn't bear to hear more. Unaware of these circumstances, I had been comfortably living with that couple. I don't know how to apologize enough, I said. It's all right. You have nothing to apologize for, Jen. Besides, finally being able to see Ben, it's made all the payments worthwhile, Kathy said, her face calm. By the way, since Dan has custody of Ben, haven't you seen him? I asked, a question that had been troubling me. Kathy's face darkened. Not even once since the divorce was finalized, she replied in a faint voice. What a revelation. I couldn't control my emotions any longer.
Kathy, I've decided. Ben's parents aren't those two, it's you. I won't let them separate Ben from you anymore.
Kathy looked at me in surprise, then nodded firmly in agreement. Actually, I haven't been idle, she revealed. She had already hired a lawyer to sue Dan and Kate for the wrongful child support and alimony. It turned out that the lawyer Dan and Kate had used was actually just a friend.
I'll help too. For Ben's sake.
Thus, in the late-night diner, Kathy and I formed a partnership. For the next 3 months, I continued my life as usual, paying extra attention to ensure Ben's safety. One day, Kathy and her lawyer came to our house. Dan and Kate were surprised and flustered, but I calmed them down and had them sit. What brings you here today? I asked, watching Dan's uneasy expression. We're here to discuss alimony claims against you and Dan, and to transfer Ben's custody to us, Kathy responded calmly. Alimony? That's about you, right? I heard from Dan, Kate scoffed. That's to be expected, since you were Dan's affair partner, Kathy replied coolly. How outrageous! I met Dan after your divorce, Kate exclaimed. Dan just listened silently as the two women argued. "Let's first hear from the lawyer," I suggested, pretending to be oblivious, gently steering the conversation to Kathy's turn. "Please look at these documents," the lawyer said, unfolding a report. It was the fake report prepared by Dan and Kate. "This report was given by Dan's side when he divorced Kathy," he explained.
That's an old document. How can it be proof of anything?
Kate was clearly flustered. "But that was a valid lawyer, wasn't it?" Dan tried to support Kate, but Kathy's lawyer interjected. "Was that really a lawyer? Which law firm did they belong to?" he asked, ignoring Dan's stuttering response. Continuing, the lawyer said, "As a fellow lawyer, I must say this report lacks credibility. The evidence photos are clearly fabricated, and the claims of Kathy's neglect of childcare are too vague."
But that evidence led to her divorce from Dan.
Kate clung desperately to her argument. Indeed, Kathy did get divorced at that time, but the child support demanded was excessively high. Plus, despite making regular payments, she wasn't allowed to see her child even once, the lawyer countered.
"It's because Ben didn't want to see her," Kate retorted.
"That's impossible." I thought to myself, remembering how much Ben had longed for his mother after the divorce. Even so, she was neglecting the child, wasn't she? Regardless of how vague the testimony was, it was there. Kate regained some of her composure. "Would you like to see the childcare diary I kept at the time?" Kathy took out a well-used B5-sized notebook. Its cover read, "Ben's childcare diary."
"That could have been written in later."
Kate dismissed it, but her face turned pale as Kathy silently showed the diary's contents. It was filled with detailed entries of Ben's feeding, diaper changes, sleep times, and Kathy's brief daily notes. Messages to Ben were written in the empty spaces. Kate, currently raising 1-year-old Tina, should understand. Could a person accused of neglecting her child maintain such a detailed diary? Kate was speechless, and Dan looked bewildered, likely not understanding the significance of such a diary. "In this diary, there are also entries about Dan's activities," the lawyer pointed out.
"Me?"
Dan looked exhausted. "About being late for work, going on business trips, that sort of thing?" Kathy added, her tone implying she knew the truth.
"Diary entries don't prove an affair,"
Kate protested. True, a diary alone wasn't proof. "That's where we had to work hard," Kathy said. Kate looked triumphant for a moment, then suddenly seemed to remember something and panicked. "I had kept Dan's credit card statements. Found them after the divorce, stuck in the household ledger," Kathy revealed. Neither Kate nor Dan seemed inclined to argue. "On the days Dan said he was on a business trip and didn't come home, the credit card statements showed charges at a hot spring inn," she continued, unfazed by their silence. "And on the same day, a woman posted photos on her social media. Tags included the name of the inn, and secret."
"That's just a coincidence. It happens all the time."
Kate started to squirm. "Yes. But this woman, despite talking about secrets, seems to be flaunting her belongings," Kathy pressed on slowly. "The watch in this picture, it's yours, isn't it, Dan?" Startled, it felt as though I could hear Kate and Dan's hearts pounding. "Such watches are common, aren't they?" "Oh, I see." Kate didn't know. "This was a gift from me and my husband when Kathy and Dan got married. A pair of completely custom-made watches." I interjected, pretending to be oblivious.
"That can't be."
After a moment of silence.
"Enough already,"
Dan said in a defeated tone. Kathy signaled the lawyer. "Since the person in question has admitted it, this makes things easier. We'll proceed with a settlement, without going to mediation."
"I won't admit it. I'll even go to court."
Kate was defiant, but the lawyer continued. "Shall we then discuss the report made by the fake lawyer earlier? Although presumptuous, we have already heard from this fake lawyer."
"That traitor."
Apparently, this fake lawyer was Kate's friend and ex-boyfriend. He had been diverting the alimony and child support from Kathy to himself. After discussing the forgery of private documents, he told us everything. Kate seemed to have no comeback. Through the gap in the sliding door, Ben peeked in. "Mom? What's wrong?" "It's nothing." The one who replied with a relieved expression was Kathy. "Let's go home." To the new home of Mom and Ben. Later, instead of a settlement, a trial was held. This time, they had hired a real lawyer. But the outcome was clear. Custody of Ben was transferred to Kathy. Dan and Kate's actions were recognized as criminal. They were ordered to return the substantial alimony and child support obtained through the forged documents, and to pay alimony and child support to Kathy. In the end, Dan and Kate blamed each other and divorced. Kate was disowned by her family, and Tina was taken in by her grandparents. Now, she's fallen into debt and the sex industry, a fate she brought upon herself. Of course, I cut ties with Dan as well. Who would care for a criminal? I let go of the house we lived in and now live a leisurely life by myself. I heard Dan is still paying Kathy, but I have no interest or desire to know what he's up to. Kathy occasionally visits me with Ben. We're like friends now. She even seemed to have a good thing going with that lawyer. When she visited, she often asked for love advice, and it seems she and Ben get along well with him. One day, as Kathy was asking for relationship advice, Ben suddenly said, "Mom, I love seeing you smile. And I'm happiest when you and that guy are together." A year has passed since then. Today, Kathy and Ben are visiting. I couldn't wait and went down to the entrance of the apartment to meet them. Soon, I saw them walking towards me, Ben holding Kathy's hand, considering her condition. Such a kind boy. "Jen, did you come down to meet us? Thank you so much." "It's fine. I was looking forward to it too. Besides," I took Kathy's bag and looked at her growing belly. "You're not just on your own anymore. I can't wait to meet the baby. Dad is excited too." Seeing their happy faces, I smiled. Outside, we were enveloped in the warm air of spring.